stars. Good morning. Hey, how you doing? As we understand that today is the day of investment, what are you investing into? As we understand today is the day of investment, what are you investing into? I wanted to get into rebate and rebate. Remember the power of words. Remember, we getting it this week on the God Hour podcast. We're gonna get into redemption, buying happiness. But before we get into that, throughout the week we drop these lessons out, and I wanted to get into the power of the words with rebate and rebate, or rebate rebate. Think about it as a frog. Rebate rebate, or trauma credits. Rebating your hook to feed from the same emotional pools, or always trying to redeem versus learning how to forgive myself. Keys. Rebating my hook with my trauma, these trauma credits, a credit in my life based on my trauma, versus me actually sitting and learning how to forgive myself. It made me think a while back, as I get ourselves set up. It made me think a while back for myself, as I just made that video. It's on my TikTok, it's in my story. Are you really healing, or are you just simply moving forward? A lot of the things that I did in my life, or a lot of the things that we do inside of ourselves, or we do with this aspect of ourselves, is simply to move forward. This false sense of progress based on this rebate. Think about what a rebate is. Think about what a rebate is. Like, you go purchase something, and let's say you go purchase something for $250, and they give you a $50 rebate, and then you jump at the deal because, I get to make $50 back. Instead of me learning that in reality, most of the things that I would purchase, most of the things that you purchase in this emotional cadence, you really didn't even really need. It was like you were literally buying happiness. You were literally buying into you were buying into the emotional aspect in order for you to feed, in order for you to live, in order for you to operate at that space. So when we think about rebate, always that emotional hook, always giving your hooks into something based on those credit of your trauma. One of the things, basically, when we come into this healing process, healing is destructive. Healing is destructive. Love is that energy is destructive. We talked about this before. Friday night lectures, we talked about the aspects of understanding that provisional instinct, where we're rationing out our energy, we're rationing ourselves out simply to stay within the acceptance, stay within the parameters of the old acceptance, stay within the parameters of the old rejection, to stay within these parameters of what we were able to get from that space. So this goes into the aspects of healing. Are you really healing? Are you going into your healing work, understanding what it is, and are you simply just moving forward? That moving forward is under that provisional mindset. Think about the provisional instinct. Every time that I used to do things, every time that I put myself in a certain position, I found myself in the beginning, whether it was a job, whether it was a relationship, whether it was a friendship, whatever it was, I found myself always doing the same thing. A lot of times we find ourselves doing the same exact thing over and over and over again. We try to sell these things about ourselves and we try to see how far we can go and how much we can put into that space at once. Whether it was the last relationship you were in, or an aspect of yourself from a last relationship, your upbringing, all of these aspects, we try to put them all into that space because it's easy to. It's easy to put myself in a position to share and be overly in this sharing aspect when I'm sharing it from an aspect of a bias. That means put it like this, you learned that in a previous relationship or a relationship prior, or even going all the way back to that first example of a relationship. The first example of you learning how to connect or attach to people. You only learned based on the bias of what not to do. Really think about this. We learned on the biases of what not to do. Most of the shit that we did was based on the biases of not what to do. So use the example of how my mother and how my mom and my pops were when it came to discussing important matters. They were passive aggressive with it. It would only be after a certain buildup. It would only be after a certain buildup of whatever emotion it was. Like, so anger, being sad, insecure, jealousy, guilt, whatever it was inside of that space. That's what they would, once that was triggered and it was enough in that pool of that space, that's when they would cast their line in order to pull something back in. So then what I learned was I don't want to wait until it gets to that point to have the conversation. But what also did I learn in that space? I learned how to react. Most of the times when you're stuck in that bias, you only learned how to react. So before it gets to a point, you only learned how to react. Remember, reaction is comfort. Comfort is reaction. If I'm able to react to something, it's showing me truly the weakness in my comfort zone. If I'm able to react to some shit, that means I'm able to respond. That means I'm able to say something to it, whether it's a quick one-liner, whether it's a quick dip out, exit stage left, no matter what it was, as long as I'm able to react to it, remember, positive and negative, stuck in the duality, that means I was inside of my comfort zone. That was based on my emotional relevance. So if I knew what anger looked like in my mind, what I saw anger look like, when I saw passive aggressiveness, when I saw guilt, when I saw neglect, I knew how to react to it. How would I react to it? Only based off of the traumatic credits base that I had in the pool. So I would hook based on that emotional credit. So a lot of times I would be inside of spaces with myself, and this is when I told you healing is destructive. It's taught to be really fucking honest with yourself. Why are you replacing or filling something with something else? A lot of times, use it for the example. You and your relationship is going. You're learning, you're experiencing, you're getting all the things based on from the last relationship. This is nothing like my last relationship. This ain't nothing like my last friendship. This ain't nothing like this. Think about how many times, and this is what I break down with my clients and in consultations. I listened for these things. When you're learning how to self-assess, this is when you start listening to yourself and how you say things. Like, think about how many times you will say, I'm sorry. Think about how many times you'll say, I'm not trying to hold up your time. Think about how many times you say it without even thinking about it. Let's think about it. That's you reacting to the traumatic response. That's you reacting to the guilt. That's you reacting to that's you reacting to the pace of your learning. That's how you react to it. I'm sorry. I apologize. Man, remember, if I got to keep doing it in that sense of trying to sustain it, I'm basically trying to convince myself, because I have not become literate in that aspect of forgiveness. Remember, to receive, I must forgive without reaction. That means everything that I'm doing, everything that I do, everything that I did before that point of going into that healing, going into my darkness, going into my shadows. The only reason I did a lot of these things was based on that feeling. Remember, you're still searching for the feeling. The lost innocence, the lost happiness, the lost sense of peace, the lost imagination, all of these aspects. So you built this whole image. So now you got this image of yourself that you have to maintain. But you got to remember, the image that you maintaining of yourself based on the trauma from me not forgiving myself, from me not learning to forgive myself. This is the heaviest part about forgiveness. If you haven't forgiven yourself in your current state where you're existing, that's linked to every other time you still haven't forgiven yourself. I had to learn that me saying an apology and being that was an investment in change behavior until I was becoming honest with me being honest with my change in my behavior by acknowledging that behavior, acknowledging my patterns, acknowledging my habits and what triggered them. Guess what I would always do? Guess what a lot of us always do? We do just enough to redeem ourselves. Remember, there's a difference between that forgiving, that aspect of learning forgiveness and to apologize and redeeming yourself. Redemption is based on a sense of ownership. So I would buy out so basically what you would do with your emotional energy, whether it's in a physical attachment, think about it like this. You fuck up all year and then on Valentine's Day, you go get your girl something or you go get your man something. You fuck up all year and then on their birthday, you want to do something spectacular. You fuck up all year or you're not at the highest aptitude of yourself. And then on Christmas time, you gonna get something. You're always trying to redeem yourself. When we're not doing this healing process, it's always a constant state of redemption. When we're not forgiving ourselves, it's always this constant state of redemption. You're always trying to redeem yourself. You're always trying to use that credit from your last event. You're always trying to use that credit based on that sense of that event to keep you in that state of being, in that state of mind. In that state of mind. You're always trying to redeem that credit to maintain that state of mind. You're always trying to redeem that sense of yourself to keep you in that state of mind, in that state of that balance. That's one of the most dangerous aspects of you staying within the trauma bond. The longer that I stay within the longer I stay reacting to a traumatic experience, the longer I stayed in that pool of my emotion. Not going into it, I would simply dip into it, deal with it. I would simply dip into it, deal with it just a little bit to get myself back in a little sense of balance. And then I hop back out again. I was not going into my space. I wasn't learning from that space. I was just, okay, I know I'm angry, but why am I angry? The why is what I was removing from myself. The why was what I was removing from myself. The sense of that why is what I was removing. That sense of self-assessment is what I was removing. A lot of times when we keep seeing ourselves in these certain sets of these patterns, the thing that hits us the hardest is the forgiving aspect. You simply, like the simplest aspect of you going into forgiveness is being able to sit inside the position and being able to say, I forgive myself. I get to forgive myself for this space was based on the amount of information I did not know, the amount of information I was not willing to apply. Now that I'm inside of this space, let me start to apply more to myself. That's the ultimate self-care. If I'm sitting inside of a position, not forgiving myself for something that happened to me back in 2008, 2007, 2020, then I'm carrying that forward. I'm only going to be able to use that as my credit in this current state. That means everything. That means that little value coupon, basically, based on that trauma credit. That's what I keep trying to get in my life. I need that to exist. I need this to exist so I can keep using this coupon, this value card, that value card, that MVP card, that Kroger card, that rewards card, so I can keep getting rewarded based on my traumatic events. Are you moving on with a false sense of that potential? Or are you moving on and moving in? What are you moving into? How are you facing that shadow with yourself? How are you dealing with that aspect of yourself? What are you doing with that aspect of yourself? This This is the key in that narrative to yourself, to learning yourself, understanding yourself, shifting forward with yourself. Until you're ready to relinquish all you received through the trauma, because you can keep getting what you want through the traumatic experience, but you'll never receive what you need. You'll never learn anything. You'll always be in this sense of bias. Remember, it's that bias that keeps us waking up irritated, waking up behind the 8 ball, waking up behind the curve, trying to catch up. It's that sense of bias that keeps us generating, operating in this compliance to operate at our old self. Do you want to stay in the oldest aspects of yourself and just keep getting the same thing? Because that's what you receive. I had to understand with myself that the longer that I stayed sitting at that pool of my emotions, not dipping in, not being with a fear to drown, a fear to get choked out, a fear of something's going to stop me, that's what I kept creating inside of my space. Remember, it's your unseen that creates your space. It's those memories that you got repressed, that you kept calling bad. Remember, every time you seen some shit and you say it's bad, it automatically gets put to the wayside. Everything that you say is good, that's the shit that goes to the forefront. But everything that you saying is good is connected to those aspects that are bad. That's what feeds it. That's the only way you can pass judgment instead of going into the aspects of discernment. As long as I stayed in that position with myself, always the same result, no matter what. It didn't matter if it was a job. It didn't matter if it was a relationship, friendship, because I was still trying to be right. I value being right more than I value my forgiveness. I value being the winner over my learning. You set those values based on what you didn't have or what you said you didn't have. You just kept making the same value, giving out the same voucher, keep putting out rain checks. So now in every space that you go into, you're trying to redeem a rain check. So at your old job, they didn't let you do something, but in this job, they let you do something, so you try to cash in the voucher. In that relationship, you weren't able to do something, but in this relationship, you're able to do more of it, so you're trying to turn in that voucher. It's time to stop this voucher shit. Stop putting this external value on your worth. Stop pulling from that same emotional pool. It's time to start forgiving yourself instead of seeking redemption. Some of the most traumatic events in your life, it came because of a sense of you're trying to redeem yourself. And that's what we're getting into this week on the God Hour podcast. Redemption or renting happiness. Until I understood that I was simply, since I was not forgiving myself, I was not apologizing to myself, I wasn't thanking myself, I wasn't going through these stages of grief, everything was a state of redemption. That means every time I told somebody about myself, traumatic experience, an event that I went through, the time I was betrayed, while I was inside of that space, I was seeking redemption for what I went through. It wasn't healing. I was just, let me keep doing it over and over and over again. Why does it keep happening to me? Because I'm in a state of redemption. But that's this week's God Hour podcast. I desire you to be the fucking best. In order to become the fucking best, it's time to get really fucking honest. Are you ready to go into the darkness and really pull that shit out? Or are you gonna try to preserve? What are you trying to preserve? Remember, everything you're trying to preserve is based on the unseen and the unhealed aspects of yourself. Old patterns, old thoughts create old results. I want you to be the fucking best. I love you. We love us. Ashe.